I do and have done in my life is produce two beautiful daughters. Because being a mother has been the constant throughout that, my adult life, and it's made me feel more powerful than ever. So the title of what I'm going to be talking about is basically I scream as loud as I can, but nobody hears me. And what I mean by that is I've had to fight from all different directions to be able to stand in front of you today and speak about my culture confidently and without people telling me not to. And I just want to take you to a place before I get into all of that. But I want you to imagine, you can even shut your eyes for this little part. It's a huge red gum tree. So we call the red gum tree Bial. And it's been growing for hundreds of years. It's seen people, it's seen animals, it's seen the environment all in harmony with each other. It's seen buboops, kids playing. It's seen bagaruk talking, so women talking, or men, gulunya, hunting that maram, that kangaroo. It's watching the water flow, watching the duat and the eels, the eels and the fish. No, the fish and the eels. Duat is fish, eok is eel. It was 2.5 hour drive. But these are the times and places that I really love the best, because we do all this other stuff around the world, but it's when we come into a community, a small community already. As soon as I got up here, as soon as I walked in the gate, I knew this would take me back to when I was a child. So you're still thinking about this tree, and it's growing healthily, the waterways are healthy, there's no extremes in weather, there might be a fire here or there, but the people are manicuring the environment through fire. They'll have cool burns, so there aren't these monster fires. So everything's beautiful. Then suddenly this tree was cut down, and that represents invasion. So they thought that the tree had died, but the roots were deep enough to keep the trunk alive. So the roots represent language, the trunk represents our elders, the shoots coming out of the side of the trunk represent the community leaders, and for those hundreds of years of life, she was able to drop many seeds, and those seeds are our buboops, our children. So that is my metaphor for cultural survival and resilience. So I was taking all these notes on the way, and I thought, no, I don't usually do notes. I can't do notes. And then I thought, put it all away. I'll just talk about myself. And when I talk about myself, it isn't literally about myself. It's about where I fit into my community, into the smaller world and the wider world, and how I help other young women and girls navigate that. Because I grew up in a time where if you were out there saying that you were a First Nation, First People, you were targeted and ridiculed and really hushed. You're told not to be who you were. But the generations before that, 2 generations before that, my father, my grandmother, weren't able to speak language, weren't able to do ceremony, weren't able to portray their identity freely. My mum's German, my dad's Wurundjeri. They would go to a restaurant, for example. Mum would be able to go in, dad had to wait outside. And that's the era that my parents grew up in. My grandmother, she grew up in the time when it was that, more than the contact period, that was more sort of the early 1800s in Melbourne. She grew up in the generation where culture had already been ripped from her. She was born at a reserve in Hillsville called Corranderk. This is where it was government policy to say you can't speak your language, you can't do your ceremonies, you can't see your family, your children are taken from you when they were teenagers and you'll never see them again. Permits were written by these mothers, these horrific letters saying, please can I see my children? And the government would say, no, they're better off over wherever they are. If anyone ever says there's no slavery in this country, they are wrong. When we talk about America, we know the history over there more so than we know it here. This country was built on the labour of black hands. In the labour fields, like if you think about sort of Gippsland area, all the beans and all those sort of crops, the gold fields as well. I think we're sort of in the gold fields kind of here a little bit. Do your research and you will find blackness all throughout that history. So that generation was the last generation of my people to be able to speak fluent Woiwurrung language. So my journey to be able to stand up here and speak a little bit about my language, speak a little bit of my language, and to practice culture, I've missed 3 generations of that. So how can one person flip that on its head and make the next generations okay? And what I mean by okay, I mean how they're going to be fine because they have culture available to them, readily available to them. They have language, they have ceremony. But me, when I went, my first memory that I remember, I was 3 years old. I was looking at the picture today, one of my first memories. I thought, wow, how can I remember when I was 3? But there was a family portrait of my 3 teenage sisters and my brother and myself, and my little brother wasn't born then. But I remember, why is this strange man coming into my house to take a photo of us? And I just remember when I was 3, I was happy. Every 3-year-old, just everything's amazing and you just do whatever you do because you're a 3-year-old, right? And then I sort of thought about my different ages through my life and where I was sort of, what I was feeling, but where I was headed. So 3 is about the earliest I can remember. 4, I remember going to have meetings about going to kindergarten. 5, I remember my first day going to school and meeting my best friend. And chair bags. Do you still have chair bags? I think they were great. So chair bags, and then my next one, really good, like these are pivotal points in my life as well. So when I was 8, you might agree with me, 8, you're not quite responsible, you don't have to do lots of things, but you're not quite a little baby. But you have the best fun in your life. You've got so much freedom. You ride your bike. You do all this stuff because you can. You're a kid. So 8 is my best time of life. Then I remember, how old are you when you're in grade 3? Probably about 8. So just after I was 8, or maybe I was still 8 because I remember I definitely was in grade 3. This girl goes to me, "Is that your dad over there?" I said, "Yeah, that's my dad. Yeah, that's him." And then she goes, "Ew." And from that moment, as a happy, carefree 8-year-old young girl, I knew I was different. I knew that people looked at me differently because of my father. And I never understood that as a young kid. I thought, why don't they like my dad? And that started me into a spiral of denial of who I was. I would not go out there to anybody and say, my dad's Aboriginal, because I did not want to get picked on. Every kid doesn't want to get picked on for being different. So I withdrew. I went into a shell. Dad was working at the SEC. He worked there for 30 odd years. And we moved to a place off country. So I was born in Hillsville, so on my traditional homelands. But then I moved off country right at the crucial time of where you become a teenager, and it's a horrible time. I don't care whoever says it's good, it's not. Because your hormones are all over the place, you don't know who you truly are, you don't know where you're headed. It's really, really 3 minutes to go. I told you. But we jumped forward, I moved off country, I became this even further insecure person as a teenager. But the thing, we'll jump a few years ahead, try to put it into the 3 minutes, is that I ended up going to high school, worst time of my life, being targeted. Then I went to a university course, and it was a First Nation course. Either the teachers were First Nation themselves, or they worked with First Nations people. Finally, I understood what cultural safety was. They embraced me for who I was. And from that moment, when I was 19 years old, I hit the ground running as fast as I could to get a hold of all this cultural knowledge that I knew, that I needed to know. But I did know my bloodline, my connection, my family, where my land is, all that stuff, and understood that people next to me did not. So I needed to make a change. So what I did, I started 2 businesses. All throughout this time, a single mum, 2 beautiful daughters, and I've got a grandson and a granddaughter on the way. She's very selfish that she hasn't given birth so far. She's got 2 weeks to go. I want to cuddle that baby. And really, it's all about helping people understand how we as First Nations people fit into a modern world. So I taught myself my language. I worked at a language centre that enabled me to unpack that. I created a dance group. I created ceremony for our young girls again. I went through ceremony with my girls and a couple of senior elders, and we've had about 40, 50, 60, it changes every time I say, go through this ceremony. It teaches them their societal roles, where they belong in a modern world, and if they muck up, we take their belts from them and they have to earn it back. So then I thought, what now? I might do my PhD. So what I did is I went overseas with my brother on a fellowship with him, just as, going out without me. And we went to Hawaii, one of the richest private schools in the world, started from scratch. They were believing culture was dying. So long story short, they said, you cannot fight the system from the outside, fight it from the inside, institutional racism, all of that stuff. So that's why I did my PhD, and it was all about how do you connect to your culture when you live off your homelands. And I'll finish by saying, all those years I was screaming and no one was hearing me. Now I'm whispering and people are hearing me, because culture is the key. Language is the underpinning factor that binds it all together. And I stand on the shoulders of giants, those ancestors before me and my elders. So Nungojan, thank you so much, and thanks for having me.